thoughts you had around like this connection between maybe the subatomic quantum intergalactic hyperdimensional geometry with like the earthly grounded feminine yin botanicals.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because like the next body of work I want to create, like spoiler alert, but I'm like, oh, the name of the show like will be like wave particle, right?
Yeah.
And really playing. And so you're already, we're synced up. You see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming
Yeah.
into focus. And it is that the paintings are the wave, are the grid, are that ethereal space in between matter and creation.
Hmm.
And the flowers are the particle of like the ways that that this consciousness takes form.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's what I really want to start to play with. And currently I feel like I'm being activated in my own way to deliver that work, and
Hmm.
that's what I've learned with working on these pieces is each one has its process and activates me in their own way.
Yeah.
I'm a different person before I made this piece and then by the end of it, because there's things in me that have to get sorted
Yeah.
to actually resolve the painting. I also have to resolve things within my own consciousness.
Mm.
And that's what's really beautiful about working with sacred geometry. And sacred geometry is available. So, these are the universe's shapes, and they're my interpretation of them, right?
Hmm.
But all of us can draw sacred geometry. And when you
Yeah.
do, there's an activation effect. And it's really subtle and incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Like, I feel like anyone who's interested in sacred geometry and sort of the history and lineage of like the kind of way the imagery has been brought forth into the three-dimensional space of like
Mhm.
humans, culture, and time, because I think these things exist beyond time. You can't understand it unless you make it. And so like anyone who's interested in like, well, you got to sit down, get a ruler, get a compass, here's some tutorials, like make it.
Yeah.
And then through the making, it's like the magic really starts to awaken because this is how you're made, like this is where you, in a sense, come from. Like, so it's almost like this recognition on the super conscious level that's inside of you of like your origins. I love looking at like the diagram of the flower of life and sort of how that is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional process of or even 4 or 5D. I mean, you can get outside of it, but even just the cellular mitosis, the way that an egg splits from the time it's germinated, and then it splits again and splits again, and it splits into the same form. So in a
Yeah.
way, it's like this stuff is us. And so when you make it, I feel like there's this definitely, like you said, like an activation that happens. It's subtle because our minds are so loud, but when the mind is quieter, these subtle things become more on the surface of our awareness. So I think it's
Yeah.
it's incredibly powerful for people to discover it on their own by making it.
Yeah.
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 And it heals
And
you
that
when you do it.
totally, it really does. And what I experienced in my last show, which was interesting, was, I had these four direction paintings painting these large works. And for the opening, I had two events. I had an opening party and a closing party. And for the opening, I didn't lead anything. I just kind of allowed everyone to experience it in their own way and their own time. And for the closing, I wanted to play around with a different approach. And I, gathered everybody in front of each piece. And I sort of opened myself up to offer the transmission of the work, because each one of these geometry forms I pair with a message of how it serves. And, I
Hmm.
released a line of prints, and all of those are
Oh
sort of
yeah.
listed on the prints as part of the graphic of the print version of them. And that was actually the most popular thing at the opening. Everybody was reading the text that
Wow.
accompanied the work. And that was a real learning for me. I was like, wow, people want to know, and the text helped them decode it. Because
Hmm.
again, the person who's not pursuing an artistic career or pursuit, most people feel some sort of like art abandoned them at some point, and they have some insecurity about their relationship as being a creator. You know, the
Yeah.
classic line, "I'm not an artist, I can't draw." When I taught, I realized, oh my God, this is like a plague. This is like caught fire. Everybody's saying the same thing, whether it's a 50-year-old, math teacher that I was leading a professional development training for, or a third grader who picked it up 6 months ago, and now it's
Mhm.
part of their constitutional belief system. So the text was a way of kind of breaking that down a little bit and helping people to perceive the art and giving them a little support and how to embrace the form and how to take it in.
Wow.
And along those lines, I took people on essentially like a docent tour of the work, right? Where we stood in front of each piece and we moved like out of the like evaluatory, hand over heart, holding the chin. I'm wondering, how long this took, right?
It's
That's the
contemplative,
other.
kind of
Yeah.
skeptical, sort of
Yeah. Like,
even
do I
even
like you? I don't know.
semi-cynical, you know?
Totally evaluatory stance.
Yeah.
And I invited everybody to open up their shoulders and to be heart-centered with the work and to expand the peripherals to really take it in so that the work can have a hypnotic trance effect and
Mhm.
move the brain state into a deeper, more steady brain state out of thinking analytical mind and into like, the delta, like moving down into the
Yeah.
deeper reservoirs of brain state. And what came through me was these delightful messages of how the work it could help them even in this moment, and inviting them to look at the work and take in, but also run a movie reel of a future event that they're seeking to manifest, and to use this moment for this interesting alchemy of
Cool.
present moment and potential future. And one of them, we did like an inner child where we invited the children of our own selves to come forward. It was South, this one, which is about summer and fun and
Mhm.
chivalry and play. And it's really child friendly piece. Um, Anyhow, it was so beautiful. And the response from that, and simultaneously I had really loud music, like really just like good, heavy, deep, like house music playing. So there's a lot happening and everyone
Yeah.
held all of that stimulation. It was like the stimulation served.
Yeah.
And and everybody who came just was like, that was the best. Like that helped me take in the work so much. And it was such an understanding for me, and where we're going and the kind of things that we're going to be bringing to the art world in the future. I mean,
Yeah.
Hilma Afklim's show at the Guggenheim, I think, was a really big gate opening for a lot of this. And her work really does function at like creating that temple atmosphere and a place for spiritual transcendence. And I went to that show twice here in New York, and yeah, it was like, oh, okay, game on,
Yeah.
you know, here we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Like we're moving into this now.
We're ripe for it. I think if we've
Yeah.
ever been ripe for it, now's the time. I think when things become so heightened in their divisiveness, when the sense of separation gets to like a crescendo point, like where it's going to fall back apart into oneness again. And I think art can be such a great facilitator for this process. And I totally agree that Hilma F. Klem's show at the Guggenheim really did open the gateway into the art world to take this kind of work in a new light. Because I mean, it's no secret that the quote unquote art world, or these power structures that sort of have dominated curation and museums and galleries and collectors and auction houses and stuff, have in general, I would say, been allergic to the word spiritual. Like,
Yeah.
if don't say spiritual when it comes to art, like that is a faux pas. And I
Yeah.
think now they're more and more open to it than ever before. And I'm seeing so many amazing artists out there doing very deep spiritual work.
Yeah,
And that's what's kind of inspired me to start this whole project and this podcast,
totally.
because I want to create that sense of community and connection to show that this is not a one-off thing, but this is a larger movement that is burgeoning, and it's for everybody. It's not, I want it in my idealist vision for the future. I want it to tear down the walls of elitism and make art approachable and effective for all beings, that anyone can. You don't have to own it on your wall necessarily to experience the higher states of consciousness that might come from them, you know?
Yeah.
And so I ask myself that question a lot, like, how can art become a facilitator for higher consciousness? And just to define some terms here for people out there who are like, well, what do you mean by higher consciousness? I mean a more heart-centered way of living where we can recognize the fact that we are all universally, infinitely connected, just by the virtue of our own aliveness, and that everyone deserves dignity because of that. And all the decisions we make on the individual collective level, if they come from that awareness of that higher state of consciousness, then what comes out of it is going to manifest a world that is going to have, hopefully, less pain and suffering and more fairness and equity and beauty and love and laughter and peacefulness.
It's
Um,
happening. It's
yeah,
happening.
man.
Come on. I mean, we're here for it, and it's happening. It's happening. The resistance is here, and I love it. I love your definition. I just love what you just said. It was so beautiful. I was just taking it in, the dignity piece. I was like, yes, where we all have dignity. It's happening, and what we're watching the resistance to it. We're watching the change coming up in all these ways, and we're watching the art world to create its change too, and it's such an exciting time to be
Mhm.
incarnated,
Yeah.
because a lot's going to happen over the course of our lives, and you can't push this movement down anymore. And according
Mhm.
to some of the masters that I'm tuned into, it's like success is guaranteed, like, but buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. But
Mhm.
there has been, from what I've learned, there has been a tipping point of consciousness on the planet. Like, enough people have awoken up to a unity consciousness awareness in some degree of their selfhood, that a threshold has been crossed where we are now moving into the 5D grid. And the 5D grid is, retiring the brain as the master organ and moving into the